Ollie Watkins is the most bought player going into game week 5, but last night he was pictured with ice around his ankle and an early substitution. Is he now in a void? We're going to be discussing that as well as all of the game week 5 players that you need to buy, sell and avoid. So as always, make sure you drop a like on the video if you are looking forward to it. And if you're not already, make sure you do smash that subscribe button for daily fantasy content. Enough waffling, let's get into today's video. So of course we have to kick things off with Ollie Watkins. As I discussed, the most bought player going into game week 5, but last night in their Champions League fixture against Young Boys, he was substituted early once again for John Duran, and as you can see here, was pictured on the bench with ice. Now, first and foremost, I need to put it out there, this doesn't necessarily mean he is injured. Unai Emery has come out and said that of course he is carrying a knock, and we know that already in the opening 4 game week, so this shouldn't come as a surprise. I don't think it is an injury, but also it isn't really exactly what you want to be seeing if you are a new owner going into game week 5. So you can see here, I've put Ollie Watkins right now as a game week 5 avoid for now. The reason being is when we see things like this with icing around an ankle, I can't be sitting here saying that you have to buy Ollie Watkins, because those Friday press conferences are going to be even more important than ever to understand whether he is a viable option for our teams. And let's be real, even if Unai Emery does come out and say that Ollie Watkins is recovered okay off the back of the Champions League game, is there even any clarification that he does play more than 60 minutes once again? I think the answer is no. So just going through some of the pros and cons in terms of Ollie Watkins going into game week 5. First and foremost, brilliant underlying numbers, 3.73 expected goals and 0.9 expected assists. He is second best in the XG. You can guess who is number 1, a certain Erling Haaland. And he is second for expected goals. So unbelievable underlying numbers. And let's be real, only really in game week 4 were there big returns for Ollie Watkins, but we know that he could have had double-digit returns in previous game weeks. So that haul in game week 4 was basically just long overdue for him. And the other thing, of course, is the fixtures are fantastic. Not only are the underlying numbers great, but game week 5 at home against Wolves, who are just struggling right now, let's be real. Then away against Ipswich in game week 6. Even Man United at home in game week 7, I think, is a good fixture for attackers. And long term, Fulham and Bournemouth. I understand why managers are going there for Ollie Watkins. And again, let's be real. If Unai Emery comes out and says that Watkins is fit and raring to go, then this avoid suddenly changes to a buy. Because even if you're looking to wildcard in game week 6, even as a 1-week punt at home against Wolves, that is a fantastic fixture for Ollie Watkins. Now, of course, a few of the cons if you are looking to bring him in. As I've discussed, an early substitute in the Champions League game and pictured with ice around his ankle. While that doesn't mean an injury, it equally isn't great news in that sense if you're looking to buy. The other thing, Champions League continues. They have probably their biggest game at home against Bayern Munich between game week 6 and 7. So, of course, if you're looking to invest in Ollie Watkins, you'll get him for game week 5 and game week 6 without any interference with the cup games, or at least ones that he'll be picked for. But then, of course, between the Ipswich and Man United game, there's no world that he gets benched for the Bayern game. But then they have a big game against Man United the following weekend. So we are going to see lots of minutes for Ollie Watkins if he's available. And that means with someone like a John Duran, and I put this here, who is coming off the bench and putting in brilliant performances. Whereas last season, Emery just had to play Watkins because he had no other alternative out there. John Duran is now proving that he can step up to the plate when he is being selected. And would I be surprised if Ollie Watkins is carrying a slight knock over one of these 2 games and Unai Emery puts his confidence on Duran to start one of these games? Absolutely not. So for now, I'm going to say if you haven't bought Ollie Watkins, he is an avoid for now going into game week 5. But of course, if Unai Emery comes out and says he's fit and raring to go, then that will change things. But right now, I think it is an avoid. Now, the first game week 5 player that you absolutely have to sell, unfortunately, is going to be Brentford's Wissa. And I really am sad recording this because this was on everybody's radar going into game week 6, mine included. And he has had a brilliant start to the season when we take into account the tricky fixtures that Brentford have had in the opening 4. And his 6.1 million really was the value forward that we all should have owned. But if anybody missed it, in game week 4, unfortunately, he was substituted with an injury after a terrible challenge Thomas Frank has come out yesterday and stated that it looks like it's an injury that will be a couple of months, which is not ideal at all. And again, it was coming into a period where Brentford were having fantastic games, game week 6, game week 7, even all the way through to game week 10. I really do think we were all looking at a potential double up in the Brentford attack in the shape of Mbeumo and Yoane Wissa. Now, of course, when I'm saying it is a game week 5 sell, doesn't necessarily mean that you have to sell him in this specific game week, because if you do have the squad available to you where you can bench him for 1 week and then maybe look to roll your transfer, that might be a powerful position to be in. So take this for an example. If your team looks good, you can bench Wissa, start someone else. Remember, if you're looking to wildcard in game week 6, whereas in previous seasons you're basically burning the transfer, we can roll transfers through wildcards. So you don't have to sell Wissa if you're planning to wildcard in game week 6. You can simply stash him away on the bench, wildcard in game week 6, and not waste one of your precious transfers. But I do think there are a few players out there that are brilliant 1 week punts or cheap enablers in the game, which we will touch on in a minute in this video, that you could easily downgrade Wissa to if you're in a position right now where you actually do need to have a playing player. So it's all about your team specific, but regardless, whether it's this week or next week, Wissa has to be sold in your teams. Now, when I talk about alternatives to budget forwards like a Yoane Wissa, I'm going to put Calvert-Lewin top of the tree right now as my game week 5 buy. 5.9 million. So again, if you're an owner in the shape of Wissa, you can easily downgrade to Calvert-Lewin. If we were to get bad news regarding João Pedro, you could easily find the 0.2 million to maybe upgrade Pedro to a Calvert-Lewin. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but I actually do like Calvert-Lewin in FPL. I have been very, very, very underwhelmed from him in terms of an FPL option for years now. But with 4 game weeks in now, his fitness is looking okay. Again, any moment now we know that injury is probably going to come. But end of the day, he could be this sort of player that we wait and wait and wait for that inevitable injury, and it never actually comes, and he continues to deliver decent performances. So Everton in general are a bit of a mess. We'll come on to that in a minute. But in terms of the pros for Calvert-Lewin in isolation, 1.32 expected goals, 4 big chances is decent underlying numbers, especially when we take into account this is an Everton team that have started the season with 4 losses, and they have just been pretty woeful. So for Calvert-Lewin to put up those numbers over that period is actually quite impressive. And while historically he is not an amazing finisher, I think these numbers are good enough to think at 5.9 million long term, this is actually a good option for our FPL teams, because I do think someone like a João Pedro at 5.7 is a better option for your teams. But when we are looking at the fixtures in isolation, we compare Brighton's to Everton's, there's no competition. Everton absolutely win that. Leicester, Palace, who are struggling defensively, Newcastle, who have their problems, Ipswich, Fulham, Southampton. Long term, this is a brilliant pick for your FPL teams. And even if you were maybe looking to wildcard in game week 6, and we spoke about you still need to make a transfer in game week 5, I don't mind the downgrade from Wissa to Calvert-Lewin for a 1 game week punt. Leicester under Cooper have been a bit indifferent, but I still fancy Calvert-Lewin in any game if he does feature to accumulate some sort of expected goal or big chances. And with the way that Dyche plays, I do feel like he has the tools available to feed Calvert-Lewin with the likes of Dwight McNeil in the side. So I think Calvert-Lewin is probably my favourite budget enabler. Of course, there's a lot of talk about Jamie Vardy right now, and right now he's actually playing decent minutes, but again, same sort of narrative. Are we just waiting for that inevitable moment where Jamie Vardy pulls a hamstring due to his age or whatever? And I think based on the underlying numbers, and it's worth noting Calvert-Lewin's are better than that of Jamie Vardy's, I do prefer the long-term prospect of Calvert-Lewin in our teams, and you absolutely need to have him on the radar for a game week 6 wildcard. So if you're looking to buy a forward right now, and you could tell the trend of this video is all about forwards, I really like him as an option. Now to probably the most controversial part of this video is going to be my game week 5 avoid of Luis Diaz. Now, please do not hurt me in the comments section. Let me explain, because I know he is the second most bought player going into game week 5. So I know this probably offends quite a lot of people watching this right now. So bit of a recap on Luis Diaz. 7.7 million, 2.52 expected goals, which is the first of all midfielders, and joint first for goals with 3. He has been fantastic for Liverpool in the opening 4 game weeks. And he has brilliant short-term fixtures coming up with Bournemouth, Wolves, Palace, even Chelsea in game week 5. So let's be real. Based on this, why the hell am I putting Luis Diaz as an avoid for game week 5? That is a very, very good question, and one that I think I need to actually go into a bit of a detail why that is the case. So first reason being is Luis Diaz's underlying numbers are fantastic, but we have seen now over the last 3 games early substitutions in all of the league games. We saw it around the 65th minute in game weeks 2, 3 and 4 with Gakpo coming on that left-hand side. And it's worth noting, for those that own Diogo Jota and are shouting at me, what about Jota? I also do think Jota is a minutes risk, of course, in the upcoming games. But I think Luis Diaz in particular, a 7.7 million being bought by everybody going into game week 5, I feel like it's my obligation to at least put those warning lights on that there are probably some minutes risks coming in for Luis Diaz. So again, benching Champions League, so you can read in that 2 ways. One, he hasn't necessarily lost this place, but Arne Slot wanted to give Gakpo some minutes in the Champions League. And it's worth noting, what I've read, Gakpo actually put in a really good performance for Liverpool. Luis Diaz coming on later on in that game. And with Gakpo coming on in the league in previous games, maybe Bournemouth is the opportunity for Arne Slot to finally give Gakpo a start in the Premier League. Would I rule that out of possibilities? Absolutely not. So what I'm trying to say is this. Luis Diaz is a brilliant buy because the underlying numbers are good, the fixtures are fantastic, and I don't think he is just going to be completely bombed out of the squad. Far from it. I wouldn't be surprised if he starts at all, but we need to make it clear that if you do own Luis Diaz, if he does start, you're basically getting 60 minutes from him. And because the underlying numbers are so good and he's finishing off high XG chances, and low XG chances, then I think naturally we're all going to be drawn towards him. But I don't think the time to buy him is now, especially with Champions League football between game weeks 6 and 7 for Liverpool once again. And we know the games that they're playing are always very difficult and they need to compete on the European stage as well as the Premier League. They can't just put out a B team each and every week. So I think Luis Diaz is perfectly fine to buy, but I'm actually going to put him in the avoid category. So I think there's enough potential rotation with Cody Gakpo to think that he is an issue for your team in the longer term. Let me know your thoughts in the comments because I know this one is controversial. Now, another forward to add to the mix is going to be Fulham's Muniz, but unfortunately I'm putting him under as a game week 5 sell. Now, whereas Wissa actually has an injury and he is completely ruled out and we know that he cannot play minutes, Muniz is maybe me jumping the gun a little bit, but I've seen enough now to suggest that he isn't an FPL option for our teams in the foreseeable future. So why should we actually be looking to sell Muniz? Well, first and foremost, he finally was benched in game week 4 for Raul Jimenez. I think going into this season, we knew that the number 9 shirt was Muniz's, and if he continued to deliver what we saw last season, he inevitably will be Fulham's main forward. But 3 game weeks in, no goals, no assists, really disappointing performances. It was only a matter of time until Raul Jimenez got his opportunity, and he absolutely took it in game week 4 with that goal. Muniz only coming on for 17 minutes. So basically the roles have been reversed. Muniz was the one playing 70, 75, Raul Jimenez the final 15. It looks like now we have got the flip of that, and being a Muniz owner at 6 million, you just simply can't hold a player like this in your FPL teams. Just to add salt to the wounds, he ended up starting, that is Muniz, in the EFL Cup last night against Preston. So that just makes him a massive minutes risk for game week 5. And if I had to punt on it, I would probably say that Muniz is going to be benched for game week 5 and a massive rotation risk for the foreseeable future. And let's be real, when we're talking about players like Calvert-Lewin, whose game time is absolutely guaranteed unless he gets injured, it's so difficult to sit here at 6 million and keep someone like a Muniz ticking over in your teams, especially when the fixtures aren't even that good. So Muniz isn't a desperate sell for this week because I still think there is a logic behind rolling your transfer if you want to and maybe making a couple of moves in a future game week. But regardless, Muniz is now not an FPL option for our FPL teams unless we were to see an injury to Raul Jimenez, which forced Muniz to start each and every game week. Otherwise, I'm an owner right now and I'm just waiting to be able to sell him to someone like a Calvert-Lewin, or as part of a double move where I upgrade him to one of those more expensive forwards in the game. So the final player for today's video is going to be Spurs' Dominic Solanke as a game week 5 buy. And again, I feel like this one is going to be quite controversial. It's 7.5 million for a player that hasn't actually delivered any FPL points so far this season. So looking at the pros for him, firstly, he is a brilliant 1 game week punt for those that are maybe wildcarding in game week 6. Brentford at home, yes, they are a good team. They put a good performance up against Man City, but I still think Spurs at home do accumulate big chances in all of their games. Apart from Arsenal, it's worth noting. So I do think that this is a good game for Spurs assets, and in particular, someone like a Dominic Solanke. And again, if you don't have the confidence of someone like a Calvert-Lewin or a Jamie Vardy, and let's say Ollie Watkins is ruled out for game week 5 or at least a massive risk, I don't think they come much better in terms of guaranteed minutes than Dominic Solanke. He's only played 2 games for Spurs, but in both of those games, he played 90 minutes. And we have seen Ange come out in multiple press conferences and say that Solanke is his number 9. He doesn't view Kulusevski as a rotation for him. And while he is fit and available, I think Solanke is going to continue to play 90 minutes in this Spurs team while Ange tries to really get him gelled in amongst his other options available and establish what his actual starting 11 is going to be. Now, we need to remember, Europa League for Spurs is going to be a thing between game weeks 5 and 6, so that is actually going to be a consideration for them. But again, being Europa League, we need to understand whether they're going to play a B team or not, and it doesn't really make a difference, especially if you're looking at a 1 game week punt to then wildcard in game week 6. Now, of course, a few problems. Limited minutes, so is he actually match fit? And of course, is he actually delivering? That's the problem. People want confidence when they're buying players, and if you have 0 FPL returns, then sometimes it can be difficult to come to those conclusions. But again, I'm not reading too much into his performances in game week 4 against the 2 best defenders in the league centrally in terms of a partnership, Saliba and Gabriel. So I really can't come to any conclusions on Solanke based on that game. And I would argue maybe game weeks 6 and 7 are tricky fixtures in isolation against Man United and Brighton. But could I also see Spurs scoring goals in those games? Absolutely. So I don't think Solanke is actually a bad pick for your long-term prospects if you want to go there. But if you're looking at maybe going for now to game week 8, I actually prefer someone like a Kai Havertz, even though the entry point isn't great for game week 5. So let me know your thoughts on Dominic Solanke, but he is absolutely on the radar for me if someone like an Alexander Isak is ruled out for game week 5. I think he should be a brilliant option for your teams. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Yes, guys, okay, that is going to wrap up today's Game Week 5 buy, sell, avoid video. As you can tell, it very much was all around forwards, but I feel like with the injuries that we're seeing with Watkins, with Alexander Isak, I feel like it is only right to really focus this video on those forwards. I haven't mentioned Alexander Isak, and that's because we really don't know what the status of him is. I will give you an update on Friday's video because I own him, and that's probably the best time to give you a real clarification on exactly what to do with him in your FPL team. So as always, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to drop a like and smash the subscribe button for daily fantasy content. Put your questions in the comment section. I'll be sure to answer them. Have an amazing day. Take care. I'll see you real soon. Cheers.